Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our February 2022 update webinar for WatchGuard. My name is Madison Slater. I am the VP of Security and Compliance at JSCM Group, as well as your friendly neighborhood WatchGuard expert. Thank you all for joining this week, and let's go ahead and jump right in. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we really get into the content. Everyone's lines are on mute. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available for playback on our website. There's a chat window located on the right side of your screen, and all questions are welcome. We'll be answering those at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to send those over, and I will be happy to answer any of those that come through. So our topics this month, we're going to be talking about we'll talk about some firmware. I've actually got a little bit of new information that I'm going to be throwing in here that's not part of that we had not initially talked about for the webinar. We're going to be focusing on a demo this month of OffPoint, and then as always, we'll talk about our upcoming training. So I'll pause right here on this screen. So I'm sure several of you, if not all of you, have already received an alert from WatchGuard. You should also be receiving an alert from us at JSCM Group about a new piece of information that has come out. WatchGuard has released information pertaining to a new possible issue. This is relating to Cyclops Blink, which is a state-sponsored botnet that might have infected a limited number of WatchGuard firewalls. Now, the key to this is that the device would have had to have had an open access from the outside world into its management through the WatchGuard policy. Basically, if your WatchGuard policy said something like any external or any, or was in other ways allowing inbound access that wasn't restricted. Now, WatchGuard is releasing a lot of information about this. They have information released on how to check your firewall to determine if it is possibly compromised through the Cyclops Blink issue. The other thing that they have done is, as of today, they have released new firmware. So for our XTM devices, we have 12.13 Update 8. For our smaller T series or older M series, we have 12.59 Update 2. And for our newer T series, M series, or larger devices, we have 12.7.2 Update 2. Now, these all, prior to this morning, we had 12.13 Update 7, 12.59 Update 1, and 12.7.2 Update 1. We are strongly recommending the new updates released today. Now, as part of this Cyclops Blink issue. Again, there are tools and information that WatchGuard has released. You should be receiving that from probably both WatchGuard and ourselves. If you want assistance in checking your device, please let us know. We are more than happy to review that. We want to ensure that everyone's device is protected, that it is not part of this issue. The big thing that WatchGuard has stressed and the big thing that we want to echo is that there's no evidence of data exfiltration from WatchGuard or from their customers. So there's no concern of a data breach from your firewall, but we do want to ensure that this issue is taken care of. So if this is not something you feel comfortable handling yourself, please reach out to us. We will be more than happy to take a look at your device, determine if it was susceptible to this, and if so, take steps to remediate it. At the very least, we highly, highly recommend this new firmware version. So new and exciting news here in the world of WatchGuard. This information literally dropped an hour ago. So this is developing, the information is developing, and we will continue to send out information as we see is needed. All right, so getting into the real topic of this month's webinar. We've been trying to come up with a couple of new things as far as ensuring you have good understanding of everything that WatchGuard is handling. And one of the big things that we've talked about a lot, honestly, over the last couple of years is OffPoint MFA. Multi-factor authentication is incredibly important when it comes to the security of your environment. Now, we ourselves have used OffPoint MFA for several years at this point. It is a service or product that we feel very strongly about. And I'll be very honest, not necessarily because it is from WatchGuard. OffPoint MFA is something that we think is a good fit for every organization, regardless of whether or not you have a WatchGuard firewall. The whole premise of OffPoint is that we can secure access with multi-factor authentication. Now, if any of you are under any kind of compliance or regulation standards, or if you are actively trying to pursue getting your organization protected by cybersecurity insurance, MFA is a baseline at this point. It is something that is absolutely necessary. Now, we at JSCM, we are a security organization. We work a lot with WatchGuard, but our whole focus is security. MFA is on the tip of our tongue every single conversation that we have when we're talking about security in an organization. So what I wanted to do this month is give you a higher or a deeper understanding of what OffPoint, what it looks like from a configuration standpoint. One of the things that I know we talk about a lot with some of our clients is the concern about deployment. And honestly, OffPoint MFA has become one of the easier things for us to roll out, especially considering the high level of impact that it has for securing your organization. Now, OffPoint is a tool that, or is a feature you can use with your WatchGuard firewall. So when we're talking about mobile VPNs, it is absolutely necessary that your VPNs be protected by MFA. But we can also tie this in with third-party things. We ourselves use it on our 365 environment. So anytime we log into our email through webmail, or if we're setting up a new profile in Outlook, MFA prompts me. I also use it when we are logging into our computers. It's deployed on all of our laptops, our desktops, our servers, any device on our network that you are logging into. OffPoint is going to prompt you. You can tie it in with a lot of other third-party stuff too. So there's really a good way. It's a good way to get MFA implemented in your environment without having your users have 15 different tokens or having to remember, for this access, I have a token. For this other access, I'm going to get a code over email. And for this other access, it's going to come as a text message to my personal phone. OffPoint gives us a more centralized way to handle MFA. So again, I want to do a deeper dive on it. We actually do a lot of demos of OffPoint. And so I'm going to walk you guys through what the setup looks like, what the environment looks like, so you get a better understanding of why we consider this to be such an important piece of everyone's security. And honestly, it all ties back to being easy to implement. So OffPoint is a purely cloud-based service, meaning that it's all done through WatchGuard Cloud. There's not like an on-prem server or piece of equipment or anything like that that you have to be running. It's all managed through WatchGuard Cloud. The only thing that we ever have to worry about installing in the network is the initial connector to get our connection set up between our environment and Active Directory, which I'll talk about a little bit more here in just a second. And if you are going to be doing the logon app, which is what is requiring your users to implement MFA when they are logging into their computer. When you're setting up OffPoint, honestly, the initial setup process is very simple. It's one of the easier things that you can get going. So just to walk you guys through what this initial setup looks like. You can create accounts directly in the OffPoint cloud. We prefer to tie this into an authentication service that you already have. So if you have something like Active Directory, then we're going to tie it into that. There's no reason making users remember multiple sets of credentials if we don't have to. So the first thing that we do is we set up our external identity. And this is really just telling the environment what our authentication service is. Now, we've got multiple AD environments ourselves, so if that's the case for you, that's not a problem. Setting these up, you're basically giving it a search base. You have an account that you need to set up so it can do the LDAP sync. You can specify how often you are synchronizing. I'm just doing it once a day. We don't make a lot of changes to our users in Active Directory, but you can go down to every 15 minutes if you would like to. So this, as again, is just telling my my OffPoint where it's going to be pulling the authentication accounts from. Again, we're just pulling it from Active Directory. No need to reinvent the wheel. Those accounts already exist. The next part of this is setting up a gateway. And again, this is just the connector for ensuring that our OffPoint and our Active Directory can communicate with each other. Active Directory is still in charge of my credentials. OffPoint does not store those. So what this gateway is just the connection between the two. If you are someone that uses 365, think about it as the AD sync tool that you have on your AD environment to sync from Active Directory to 365. Very similar process that it's using. It's just relaying that information so that OffPoint can verify that those credentials exist. Now, one of the things that I honestly like about OffPoint is we have a nice little download section, so I don't have to go searching around for whatever it is I need to download. So for this gateway installer, we run this on a device in the network. We typically do it on a server, but it's not required that it's on specifically the AD server. I just like having all of my stuff in one place. And the only other requirement is that you have either Java or Amazon Corretto installed for that, which very simple to get that going. So at this point, we would have created a connection between our Active Directory environment and between our OffPoint. Now, the whole premise of management of OffPoint is you're going to be pulling in users, but you're really going to be managing them by group. It's a lot easier to manage by group than to manage by individual user. Now, these groups are important for a couple of reasons, but the big thing is that as we get into this setup, we're going to be able to give more granularity to levels of access. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a moment. But the next phase of this is deciding what groups do I have in Active Directory that I want to import into my OffPoint. Now, these could be security groups that I already have set up. Maybe I've already got my users broken out by group for things like file share access. This could also be you're going in and you're setting up whole new groups purely for the purpose of MFA. That's what I did, but again, if you want to use a structure that you already have, that's perfectly fine. All of our groups are identified here. So you can see I've gone into, on my domain, I set up specific MFA groups that I have separated my users into. I got fairly granular with mine. You might say, I only have 2 groups of users. It really is going to be the policies that are going to help you decide if you need to break those out a little bit more. So the way that OffPoint works, to talk about licensing for a second, is when you purchase OffPoint, you buy the number of licenses equivalent to the number of users that you're going to be setting up inside of OffPoint. So let's say you have, you're going to be attaching this to your mobile VPN. You have 15 people that connect to your mobile VPN. You need 15 licenses. The license purely means that it's purely associated to the user account. A user can have multiple tokens. So what that means is that I can have a user that has OffPoint set up where they can get their code from their phone. I can also give them a hardware token. They can have multiple tokens that they're using. We can also have multiple resources. But what I mean by that is the tools or the environments that I'm attaching MFA to. So if I'm attaching it to my VPN, my 365, I'm doing a logon app, I'm attaching it to my Screen Connect, all of that is fine. It's not going to count against my licensing. Licensing is purely done by user, and we control the users that are being synced into OffPoint by the group. So if you have an account that you don't want to have an OffPoint license, we're just going to make sure that it's not a member of one of these groups. So when we do our initial sync, what this is going to do is pull our user accounts in from Active Directory. And the 2 requirements to get that to work from the account perspective itself is that the account has to be a member of one of the groups that we have specified, and we have to make sure that they have an email address in the email field in their AD account information. If we have that, we should be good to go. Now, when an account gets pulled into OffPoint, what this is going to do is, based off of the email address, it will automatically send an email to that user to start their activation. And it's a very simple process. They will get this email. It will reference that it is from OffPoint. there is a start activation link. They will click on that, and then it's going to open up a website where there's a QR code. Now, prior to this, it's good to put some instructions out for your users on what to expect. If you are doing what we as IT people do, which is telling our users not to click on suspicious email, and we send them an email that they're not prepared for, we're probably going to get a lot of questions. So where we have found success in this, just in the times we have rolled this out, is to give your users a heads up. Hey, you're going to get this email. This is legitimate. This is an activation process that you need to walk through. As part of that, we go ahead and recommend that they install the OffPoint app. The OffPoint app is on the Apple Store. It's on the Google Store. It's free. Actually, everyone can download that. So anyone here, you can go onto your mobile device and you can download the OffPoint app. I believe it shows up as WatchGuard OffPoint, AUTHPOINT. This app in its base form works a lot like an app like Google Authenticator, meaning that it's a way that you can scan MFA QR codes in and it generates codes for you. The app itself is completely free, so we always recommend as part of this setup, you go ahead and have your users install that app. So when they get that activation email, there's a QR code, they scan that into the app, and that is what will create their token. Now, just as an example, this is what our app is going to look like. Tokens that we are setting up through our OffPoint portal will show up in the top section, and then in the bottom section you can do third-party tokens. So if you come across a website that allows you to do MFA by scanning a QR code into an authenticator app, there you go. I like to do, every so often, I like to do a little challenge in our office to see who has the most. I believe I'm usually in the top. Uh, I use this for a lot of stuff. I use it for work things, but I also use it for personal things. Anything that allows me to do MFA, I go ahead and scan that into my OffPoint app all in one place. So when the user gets sent the email, you will see this token here saying pending when they initially get the email, meaning they haven't activated it. Once they have activated it, it's very easy for you to monitor inside of the portal to make sure that your user has actually set up their token. So we as administrators can keep an eye on that, make sure that we've got everyone set up. You don't have to use the mobile token. If you have users that don't want to use their personal device, they don't have a personal mobile device, you have a company policy where you don't or can't require them to use their mobile device, then we have hardware tokens. Hardware tokens can be purchased in packs of 10, and they are nice little keychains manufactured by WatchGuard. You can import these into your OffPoint portal and then assign them out to the users that need them. An account can have up to 20 soft tokens, so basically 20 mobile devices with a token associated to that account, and unlimited hardware. Where this is particularly beneficial is if you have shared accounts. So like our support email account, multiple people in our organization have access. We all have tokens to get into that. The user rollout is usually the most time-consuming piece, and honestly not because it's difficult, but because we have to play the waiting game. We have to make sure that all of our employees are activating their tokens, getting themselves set up so that we can get MFA actually implemented. Usually from a deployment process, in that time, we're getting the rest of our setup ready to go. So this is where we would be configuring or starting the configuration to tie MFA into our mobile VPN, starting the configuration to get this set up with 365 or to get our logon apps started, things like that. And that's where we get into our resources. Resources are the tools that you're tying MFA into. So you can see we use MFA on a lot of things. WatchGuard has a very robust documentation page with integration guides on not just WatchGuard items, but third-party tools as well. We use it on a lot of third-party stuff. When you're setting up the resource, again, this does not tick away at your licensing as long as everyone using that resource is already set up with a token or with an account. It differs depending on what your third party or what your tool is that you're setting this up with. But again, there's really good integration guides that WatchGuard has developed to tie those in to whatever service it is that you're trying to get MFA set up with. And then finally, and honestly, my most favorite piece, because I am who I am, policies. When you are setting up MFA, when you're setting up OffPoint, you can write policies, much like you write them on a firewall, that specify the groups of users, what resource they have access to, and what type of MFA is going to be required. So as an example, we have an onboarding group. So this is what I use for a brand new user. There's a sort of chicken and an egg situation that happens. I need my user to have a token to get into their 365 email, but to get into their 365 email, they have to have a token. I can get around that by writing policies. So basically, if you are a member of this group trying to hit my 365 resource, I'm only requiring that you access with a password. Once they're in their email and they activate that token, I change their group in Active Directory. So now when they log into 365, they input their password and then they can choose their MFA option. So through your policies, you can get really granular with how you want that behavior to operate. Through our policies, this is also where we can do things like safe network locations. So I can write a policy that says, if you are in my office, I'm only going to require you to put in a password. If you're outside of my office, then I would require you to use MFA. I can set time schedules on this, depending on the time of day, is going to require different types of authentication. Geofencing, we can do, we can lock it down by where they are geographically. So there's a lot of functionality here, and this is something, these policy objects are something that WatchGuard is continuing to work on. They've got a couple of other geo-based items that they will be releasing over the next year that are going to give us even more functionality and ability to lock that down. So through my policies, again, I can get really specific with how I want this to work, what user, what kind of access they have, that kind of thing. What type of MFA is going to be required. As far as monitoring, there are, excuse me, reports here inside of OffPoint, so I can see general activity. I can break it down by activity of user. I can see both inactive and active authentication. There's a lot of information that I can pull out of this. One of the things that I really like about OffPoint is that it's simple. It really is. It's simple from a setup perspective. It is also simple from a user perspective, which honestly, let's face it, is the more important thing. MFA is already adding a level of complexity. We know this. But if we can make it a little bit simpler on our users, if we can make it so that they are not overly frustrated, that it's not an overly complicated process, then it makes that a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier for us to roll that out for our users. There are ways through policies to make exceptions if we need to, but what we have found is when we're rolling out MFA, if you give your users plenty of heads up, if you give them plenty of information for starting out, if you let them know that this is really just to protect them, it really makes that process a lot simpler. All right, let me jump back here to my presentation. So as far as our upcoming training, we do have a bunch of classes coming up. So if you want to get a lot more in-depth with WatchGuard, I'm actually coming to you this month from Seattle. We're in the middle of a class this week, so we would love to have you join us. We've got a lot of classes coming up over the next several months. We offer all of our classes both virtually and in person. So and we've expanded out the cities and time zones that we are going to be in. So lots of options coming up for WatchGuard training if you want to get in on one of those classes. All right, and let's move it over to questions. And as promised, this month we did we're giving away a JSCM and WatchGuard branded backpack. I will be very honest, I am using one this week. It is amazing. So Felton is randomly drawing a name. So give me just a second. Go ahead and send over your questions if you have any. Okay, I do have a question. Do I have any insight on when WatchGuard is going to start supporting the logon app for AD on Azure AD joined computers, i.e. cloud only? I will be honest, I don't have a lot of information on that. From everything that I have seen with that piece of it, it is unfortunately not up to WatchGuard. It is up to Microsoft and what they allow or don't allow. I know that that is something that that WatchGuard gets questions about a lot, but from things that I have read, it is kind of at the Microsoft level. But definitely something that if we get more information on at any point, things like that. New features and things like that, we always make sure that we share just because, and especially with Azure AD, I know that that's a big thing that people are using. All right, so it looks like we drew a name for this month's webinar. Ricky Sullivan, you are the lucky winner of a JSCM Group backpack. Thank you all for your time this month. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions outside of this webinar, please feel free to reach out to myself or your account manager. If you have any suggestions on topics or anything that you would like us to cover, please let us know. I'll be very honest, the news from WatchGuard recently has been a little light as far as new hardware and things like that. That's fine. They go through cycles. So it's why we've been bringing you more demo focused webinars. But if there are any topics that you want us to cover, please send those over. We are here for you guys, so we want to make sure that we're making these as relevant as possible. If you again, you should have gotten an email from us about the new vulnerability that is out. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out again, either to myself or your account manager here at JSCM, and we'll make sure you guys are taken care of. Thank you all so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you in March for our next webinar.